Utah Jazz have made a move. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Juancho Hermangomez are members of the Utah Jazz. Who are they? Why was this the move? What were the other options? And what does this tell us about where the Jazz are heading? On the floor, the Jazz were brilliant against the Golden State Warriors last night. We'll touch on that. Plus, what could happen today on trade deadline day? All coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thanks so much for tuning in and making Locked on Jazz your first listen every single day. We are free and available on all platforms for you. It is trade deadline day. Locked On will be live today with a trade deadline special at Locked on NBA on YouTube. So go grab it right now, subscribe and be there. Kim Becker will host it, and then we'll have a bunch of other all of our local experts involved and everything of that sort. Good morning to the crew, Luke and Adam and Brandon and Adam and Richard and McKay and Andrew and Riker and Kellen and Lacey and Ray. Where are you? I hope to see you soon. EJ and Scott as well. Big crowd right out of the chute as the Utah Jazz yesterday traded the contract of Joe Ingles along with former second-round pick Elijah Hughes in a two-way deal, and they ended up with two players, Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Juancho Hermangomez. Let's start with why this is the deal, how this kind of comes about, what the idea was. So the day Joe Ingles tore his ACL, it was 100% guaranteed the Jazz were going to trade that contract. There was no question. Like, there wasn't any ifs, ands, or buts. The question was how they were going to do it. Frankly, there was probably one of three choices the Jazz could make of what they were going to do with Joe Ingles' contract. One is couple it with another player, another contract, and try to bring in a player that's going to make an immediate impact to change the championship run and get you going. Those are hard because, one, there aren't that many players available like that. And if we were to use Harrison Barnes as a model to that, it's clear that Sacramento wants to win now, make the play-in, try to make the playoffs. And Harrison Barnes, Joe Ingles, torn ACL, is not going to work for Harrison Barnes. Jeremy Grant was not coming for Joe Ingles' torn ACL unless you were putting two first-round draft picks in it, and that's a little steep, particularly with our draft situation. So there really didn't seem to be a trade using Joe Ingles' contract to go get a player that would make our rotation and start for us. And as I talked about yesterday, who finishes? My model was, if you can't get someone who's finished, get out of the tax. Take Joe Ingles, take Elijah Hughes, frankly, and trade it to Oklahoma City, pull the restrictions off our draft pick, and get out from under the tax. I talked to three different people in the league yesterday after our deal went down about what, and the reaction of every single person I talked to about that was the same. Wow, that's a great financial move. That's a terrible basketball move. And Oklahoma City would have made you pay. So there was no way you were doing that, from what I learned yesterday talking to people, without having, you're going to pull all of the restrictions on the draft pick that we own them, and it might cost you another pick. And the point I got from everyone was, this is clear, yes, that's a trade you can make. You can get under the cap, do all those things. But the fact is, what you really have right there, that's a pure financial deal that would not be good for your franchise building or anything of that sort. And so really what we have here is a pretty incredible commitment, again, from Ryan and Ashley Smith to commit to winning, to be deeper in the tax than we've ever been, not to bail out of the tax, and to actually then still use the Joe Ingles contract in the next manner by which it could be successful. So choice one certainly would have been use Joe Ingles' contract, find the player that's available that pushes us over the edge and wins us a championship. And I think there's every indication that we, regardless of tax, we probably would have done that. That clearly doesn't seem to be there. None of us could actually put it together. We couldn't find it to be the right deal, and it didn't exist. The second option is what I talked about, which was just save money, and who cares about draft? Get out of the tax. Like $30 million to me is such an astronaut. And the fact that Ryan Ashley Smith didn't do that is pretty large. Once again, a pretty unbelievable commitment to winning in Salt Lake. And so what they did instead is used Joe Ingles' contract to be able to go get a player who was a former 17th pick of the draft. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker is really the big piece of this. Juancho Hermangomez, because of his contract, less likely to be sticking around long-term with the Utah Jazz. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, what they did is they went and grabbed a former top 20 draft pick, 17th in the draft, who they now put into our developmental system. And they basically have not, the end of this season, off season, and next year to see whether or not they can turn him into a player. He's 6'5". He's got a 6'9" wingspan, 6'5.5". And you have an opportunity here to develop this into a player. So you use Joe Ingles' contract to be able to go get a player. The fact is, we don't have those draft picks. We haven't had a top 20 pick in forever. We hope to not have a top 20 pick anytime soon. We don't have access to that kind of player. And if there's a gap on our team right now, it's we're lacking that young energy, that young exuberance, that great young athleticism. We're watching what Udoka Azubuike is the 28th pick. Trent Forrest is an undrafted free agent. Eric Paschall is a second-round draft pick in his third year. What that youth is bringing to our team right now is abundantly obvious. And I think when you look at what the Jazz did yesterday is they went and said, okay, we don't have access because we win, and we don't have a lot of draft picks, and we've used those players, Grayson Allen, we've used those draft picks to go bring other players in. Here's a chance to go take a swing at someone. We're going to go take a swing at this guy, see if it works out. We're going to put him in our developmental staff that's done an unbelievable job with Joe Ingles, with Royce O'Neal, with Trent Forrest, and shown it has an incredible track record of developing talent. And we're going to take this guy who was a top 20 pick, who's 6'5.5", who's 6'9" wingspan, who can put it up. And then we'll get into the weaknesses here in a second. On the simplest and most inane and kind of non-analytical analysis of a player, because frankly, most of the analytical analysis of Nickeil Alexander-Walker is not great because he's just crazy inefficient. But on just the simplest form of what are you getting as a player, the dude has dropped 30 5 times in the last 2 seasons. How many guys do we have on our roster that can drop would be capable of dropping 30 5 times in the last 2 years? Donovan, Jordan, Bojan, done? I think so. Right? Mike's not dropping 30 anymore. So he has an ability to get shots off, an ability to get shots up, an ability to score that's actually naturally a little different than what we have. So there's the breakdown of why we did what we did. Now we'll dig into Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Juancho Hermangomez is interesting because I've actually always kind of liked him. And there's a few things about why I just don't think, I'll just say this now, why I don't think he's going to be a large part. So first of all, he is a definitely break glass in case of emergency, could play tomorrow. He's been around the league for a while. And in that sense, with Rudy Gay not really playing well yet and some of those things, if he holds on the roster for the rest of the year, might be just a great guy to have at the end of the bench. Might just win you a game. You never know. I really, really liked him out of Denver. His third year in Denver, he started 25 games. He was 23 years old. It looked like he had broken through. He was shooting 37% from three. It actually looked like, and they went to Minnesota in that trade in the next season when they decided they didn't want to sign him. And and he was really pretty good for 14 games in Minnesota. He averaged 13 points. He shot 40% from three. And it was like, wow, This guy, they got Beasley and Juancho Hermangomez for nothing. And then something went wrong. And I don't know what it is, but since then, he just has not made an impact in the game. Now, whether the game changed on him or something of that sort, I don't know, honestly. And I haven't, he really became such a non-factor that he didn't play as much. He's a power forward, not a center. So he's kind of a corner 3 shooting power forward backup. Like, can we turn him into a George Niang? I don't think he's got that background. He has played a bunch on the Spanish national team. But the real thing, and the reason why he probably is not one that sticks with us forever, is he's got 6.6 non-guaranteed next year. And I just can't imagine that we pick up a $6.6 million contract on him next year. So he's with us for this year at the end of the bench. If we need him, he can play. He's played in playoff series, limited. I mean, I think he played about 12 minutes in Denver's playoff series early on before he got traded, and then he was in Minnesota. And then he bounced from Minnesota to Boston, and you kind of thought, again, I thought it was a nice fit for – he's kind of that signing that everyone makes that you're like, oh, that's a good signing. It just hasn't turned out. He had a terrible year last year in Boston, never got off the floor. Ended up in San Antonio, or maybe that was this year, early in this year. Then he ended up in San Antonio on part of the one of those deals, and now is with the Jazz. His last full season was last year in Minnesota. 52 games. He shot 32% from 3 and 43% from the field. So, his previous year in Minnesota, he showed a lot of signs. I think he's a break glass in case of emergency. Only 26-year-old, former 15th pick of the draft. You can definitely use him if you need to. I'll look at some of his catch and shoot numbers and see what I can find on some of that here in a minute. Today's show is brought to you by a really interesting group. It's called Summit Capital. It's a local Utah County local investment group, and they're looking to provide capital for 3 different types of people. Owners seeking to sell their businesses, provide capital for management seeking to buy out owners of businesses. That's one I think is most interesting. And entrepreneurs seeking capital to help grow their businesses. They were one of the companies that invested in Locked On. They were great to work with. They never once asked about an exit date. They're entrepreneurs themselves. They approach investing from the mind of the entrepreneur. So unlike private equity or venture capital firms, they're putting artificial timelines, telling you when you've got to get the money out. We never heard that once from them in the process. The one they're looking for that's most interesting is if you know someone who works for a company, the family's owned it for a long time. They're maybe not taking it the next step. They don't have the energy and juice anymore to take it to the next step. But you've got the worker inside that building who's been running it for a while is not part of the family. So they're not going to get the ownership. They don't have the capital to buy the company. Summit Capital can come in, give you the capital, buy it. Everyone wins. The owners get their money. You get to take the company to the next level. So if you know someone in that circumstance, please let them know about Summit Capital. You can call Matt over at Summit Capital at 801-796-2033. 801-796-2033, or you can email lockedonjazz at summitcaputah.com or summitcaputah.com. Just at the web as well. Today's show is brought to you in part by Bet Online. The big game is coming to you on Sunday. Bet Online has you covered with more props, odds, lines than ever before. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, news this season. And it's not just football. It's BetOnline has up-to-the-minute pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates on current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we'll get into Nickeil Alexander-Walker. We will get into a few others. I was trying to see if I could get the odds for I don't seem to have it for futures on the NBA before the season, the trade deadline. My guess is Harden Simmons goes down. I think Brooklyn's going to be amazing with Ben Simmons at center. I think they'll win the title if they get Ben Simmons today. I think they'll beat Milwaukee. Right now, Milwaukee to me feels like the favorite to win the title. We'll see. All right, so let's dig into Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He's the main piece of this puzzle. If you've been listening to me on points gained, he is the second lowest points gained player in the NBA other than Jalen Suggs. He is just uses a ton of possessions and is wildly inefficient at this point in his career. And this is where the Jazz hope to be able to cause some development for him. So of players who have played at least 30 games, Jalen Suggs is minus, the rookie is minus 2.8, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is minus 2.4. And, he uses a lot of possessions and he uses them inefficiently. And so therefore that rating continues to decline. If we look over at him in the last 2 seasons, this is not kind of a new creation. He's always been a high possession user. He's actually incredibly similar to where Jordan Clarkson was at this point in his career. Alexander Walker was a minus 1.1 in the 2021 season. And then in the 1920 season, his rookie year, which is usually players' worst years, Alexander Walker was a minus 1.1. So this year is a little bit of an outlier that he's much lower than usual with his numbers. So why would we trade for a guy that's so inefficient? Because he's 6'5.5". He's a 6'8" wingspan. He was an elite top 20 talent out of Virginia Tech, grew up in Toronto, left Toronto to actually go to high school in America to be able to play basketball, roomed with his cousin Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at the Hamilton School in Tennessee, and then went to Virginia Tech from there. So why? Because this is a guy who's got some elite skills. He played in the Nike Hoop Summit. He does some things real well, and you're hoping you can develop them in. One of the things he does well is run the pick and roll. So he ran 15% of New Orleans pick and rolls this year, and he had a 0.94 pick points per chance. That's not great for us, but it's better than Devontae Graham at 0.89. It's better than Brandon Ingram at 0.93. It's better than Thomas Satoransky at 0.79. So of the guys on that roster, he was their best pick and roll player. And he actually, ironically enough, ran the pick and roll best with Willie Hermangomez, the brother of Juancho Hermangomez. He did not run a very good pick and roll with Jonas Valanciunas, which he ran most of the time. But the minute he went to anyone else, he was very good with Willie Hermangomez. He was pretty good with Jackson Hayes. When he ran some small pick and roll with Brandon Ingram, he was very, very good. If you look at his isolation game, that's where he begins to struggle badly. 0.68 points per isolation and 86 chances this year. That's not his game. But yet he ran 12% of New Orleans' isolation. We don't do a lot of isolation. We play advantage basketball and give him opportunities in that setting. And you're dealing with a 6'5.5" guard, really big for us, who has a 6'9" wingspan. So he's, frankly, about as long as Joe was, who's a better athlete, who can ambidextrous, according to all scouting reports and his draft scouts, who can play with both hands, and now hopefully plays with a little bit more of a isolation game or non-isolation game opportunity game to him. His drive game's not bad. It's 0.9 points. He goes to his left far better than he goes to his right. And he prefers to go to his left hand. He's a 0.94 points per chance if he goes left. He's a 0.83 points chance if he goes right. That's not bad, by the way. 0.9 points per drive is really not, for a guy who's having this badly inefficient season. Brandon Ingram's great. He's at 1.01. Josh Hart was great at 1.06. Devontae Graham's at 0.93. If we grab to another season here and try to look at the same numbers with Nickeil Alexander-Walker to see what he can do. So last year he was at 0.86 on his drive. So, okay, you're beginning to see actually maybe he got a little bit better here. I'm being optimistic, certainly, on this. He didn't run the pick and roll very much at all last year. He was the 6th most common Pelican to run a pick and roll in the 2021 season. He only ran 10% of their pick and rolls. So some of the efficiency is that 3 years into his career, he's suddenly running the pick and roll. In his 1920 season, this is what gets, these are the little tiny tidbits on a wildly inefficient player that makes you wonder whether the Jazz might have something here. So Alexander Walker in his 1920 season, his rookie season, he ran 9% of New Orleans pick and rolls. Drew Holiday, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram ran most of them. He had a 1.03 pick and roll. That's really, really good. But he ran 9%. He ran 400 of them in that season. In the 2021 season, next year, where his next level of development is supposed to happen, he ended up running 481, the exact same amount. He was much less good. He ended up running the majority of his pick and rolls with Jackson Hayes, who I just think is an unreliable player. But he was good with Steven Adams. Okay. Then this year, he went from last year running, those 2 first years running 400. That's hardly any, pick and rolls. To this year, they suddenly unleash him. He's already run 558, and he's better than he was a year ago. He's still such a baby in that realm of things. The Jazz, have 3 or 4 guys who run over 1,000 a year in that regard. How is he about finishing around the basket and doing things of that nature? If you want to check out his athleticism, I'm actually going to take you back to his college stats here in a second. So if you look at where he shoots and how he shoots and things of that nature, he takes 22% of his shots at the rim. That's been rather consistent. He's not a very good finisher at the rim. He's at 54% for his career at the rim. That's a low number. That says there's not elite athleticism busting over the top of the or anything of that sort. He's a not great mid-range player. He's at 33, 36 kind of percentage shooter in those realms, taking a decent percentage of 2-point shots. About 52% of his shots are twos, 48% are threes, and then he has not shot the three well this year. We'll dig into that in just a minute. In fact, let's do that. So what's happened with his shooting? His catch and shoot game this year is 32% from three, and his off the bounce shooting game is 29% from three. He's taking 6 threes a game at 31%. That's how you become the second least efficient point guard scoring or second most efficient offensive player in the NBA. Those two numbers. Has he always been like this? Let's go back to his rookie year. 1920 for Alexander-Walker was his rookie year. 2021 was his second year. And my NBA stats, which here we go. Let's go to 1920 first, actually. 1920 shoots 35% catch and shoot three, which is about league average, and takes almost no pull-up off the bounce threes at 0.8 a game, 1 a game, predominantly catch and shoot, 5 threes a game, shoots 35%. Average. Great. No big deal. No reaction. The next year, in the 2021 season, he kind of is at a similar stage along the way as he wait 1 second. I want to make sure. There we go. So his 2021 season, his 1920 season, he shot 40% on catch and shoot threes, took 1 pull-up, was bad at it, 23%. Next year, he goes to 35% on his catch and shoot threes, same, very few off the bounce, 33%. This year, the volume just goes through the roof, and the three-point shooting drops. So he goes to 32% on catch and shoots and 29% on off the bounce, taking 2 times as many off the bounce shots as he did a year ago. This is probably playing pick and roll. This is expanding his role. This is Lonzo Ball being traded, them Drew Holiday, like some just weird stuff in New Orleans, and none of those things kind of stretched out. So that's kind of where it is. I wanted to go back to the draft thing. We keep these draft numbers, and they've generally been surprisingly accurate on what we find. And so when we break down these drafts, we break them down into 3 different categories. Athleticism is how you do in transition and isolation. Shooting is how you do in catch and shoot. And then creation is how you play your jumper off the off the bounce and things of that nature. So let's go back to Alexander-Walker at Virginia Tech, his senior year, and look at what we had on him and how we would have viewed him. Let's just be totally straightforward in how we would have viewed him. So 6'5", 200 pounds. He was in the 27th percentile of isolation percentage. So he was a poor college isolation player. That has shown to be true still in the NBA. He was the 88th percentile in transition percentile of how he's scored and finished it open court. Okay, that's good. That means a little crafty, a little nifty. That tells you a little bit. The 27% isolation tells you he's not a pure offensive player in that regard. Now, if we go look at his pure shooting, and this is what I think will be interesting, is there something in here, or this is his playmaking. He was in the 70th percentile on the pick and roll with 161 pick and roll attempts, which was about the 3rd most of anyone in that draft. And the 70th percentile is good. The only guys that were noticeably better with at least some attempts, Darius Garland in 41 attempts was in the 92nd percentile. DeAndre Hunter was in the 97th percentile with just 22 attempts. And then Cam Reddish only had 44 attempts. Of the guys that had, 100 plus pick and rolls, Kobe White was at the 52nd percentile. Ja Morant was at the 56th percentile. Romeo Langford was in the 90th, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker was in the 70th. So that's a pretty encouraging number to see there uh, for the Jazz and his playmaking. Then we get to his shooting, which has been, as we just talked about, kind of hit and miss. And he was in the 82nd percentile on his shooting, on his spot up percentile was in the 82nd percentile, and then he was on the spot up attempts. He had 147 spot up attempts. He was in the 76th percentile. He was a good college shooter. He went 49 of 126 on his catch and shoot, 72nd percentile. There's a lot of pieces here which say like this kid should be doing better than he was doing. He was 18 of 41 on unguarded catch and shoots. That's pretty darn good. It's a 53% effective field goal percentage. It's good. His off the bounce game was 23 of 64, which is actually pretty good for the collegiate level. So you look back at his college stuff. Kevin Pelton said yesterday he's the 13th pick on his board. I would have said like these numbers would make me excited about him. His pro numbers make me completely unexcited about him because he's been wildly inefficient. His pick and roll ball handling, he's average. He's in the 41st percentile. His spot ups in the 40th percentile. His transition game's not great. His isolation game's 4 of 22 shooting. So, first off, if we get rid of the isolation stuff he was doing in New Orleans with the ball in his hands, where he wasn't good in college and he wasn't good in the pros, maybe that just increases his efficiency all by itself. So it's a play. That's really what it is. It's a play on a guy who was a top 20 pick who you're trying to see whether or not you can turn him into something and take advantage of our developmental staff and see what you can do with him. That's what it is. And you're using Joe Ingles' contract at this point to see if you can kind of get a play out of him. The last note I would say on him, and what I think is, we have not been great at this with everyone switching us all the time. I always like to look at a player and see whether or not his field goals are assisted. And interestingly enough, the number of his field goals assisted went way up this year on 2-pointers. His 3-pointers have always been 90%. So that actually should have led to more efficiency than less efficiency, and it didn't. The only other notes that I would look at, if I'm looking at a player like this, I would look at a few things back in their college. How did he shoot free throws? Free throws usually yield to good 3-point shooting. He's a 76% collegiate free throw shooter. So that's about average. That leads me to believe he's not like about to go shoot 42% from three or anything. Steal and block rate in college usually tells you activity and what they can be in the pro level. He had 1.9 steals per game, which is pretty darn good, and half a block a game for a college player. So both those numbers lead you to say, okay, this guy should be able to defend a little bit. And some of those numbers are still pretty good. His steals per 36 minutes is about 1. His block is still a half. So the Jazz got, in summation, a 6'5.5", 6'6", with a 6'8", 6'9" wingspan, top 20 pick who has not materialized very well yet on the offensive side in the NBA. And they take a shot at a top 20 pick who they can try to develop into a player. And frankly, it's a type of player that we don't have access to otherwise, and that's why you take that shot. All right, we'll look at what other things we can do today. I hate to kind of lose last night's game. The Jazz were so good against Golden State, but we'll get to that. Today's show is brought to you in part by our friends at rockauto.com. They've been with us for a long, long time on Locked On. It's pretty great. And with the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's impossible to go to your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So don't endure that pointless, seemingly irritating questioning and this and that. And, oh, well, this will be perfect for you. I know it's not the right one, but it'll be perfect. Save time and money in using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, or 100% more on parts for a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, reliably low for every customer. The old-school website takes you through without any glitz and glamour and gets you exactly what you need. So go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts your car or truck will ever need, right? Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box. No, so they know who sent you to rockauto.com. All right, I feel like the chat room's huge. Our live audience is the biggest it's ever been. And there's just been massive chat. I do want to, do me a favor. If you're in the chat still, it's going to be hard for me to, it's been awesome. Way to go, guys. I'm glad you're having a good conversation. Feel free to drop me a question right now. I'll try to get to some of the questions and see if you have anything that you want to. Andrew wants to know about the buyout market. The Jazz did not save as much money as, maybe I thought they could have on Joe Ingles. So I think that will restrict us a little bit on the buyout market of what we do and who we go and get. And frankly, I think breaking glass in case of emergency, Juancho Hermangomez would actually been like a pretty good buyout market guy to give us kind of that extra backup along the way and see what they have. So I'm not sure we'll be super active in that area. And Hassan Whiteside reminded us last night how good he is, right? Like he can be great. That's interesting to me on Hassan. First of all, last night was as good a performance as Jazz have had all year. Without Rudy Gobert to play that kind of defense, the offense was connected, the defense was super connected, and Hassan was brilliant. And I think we have to remember a few things on Hassan, and it's frustrating, I know, at times for fans because he kind of does this, right? He's just this roller coaster of up and downs. He's on the minimum, and he's playing a really reduced role. And I think we're relying on him in the playoffs is going to probably be a risky move at times. But boy, there aren't a lot of guys out there that you're going to get on the minimum contract who are going to go get you 17 rebounds in a game and 7 block shots. There just aren't. And frankly, he won us last night's game. And I think he's probably won us 3 or 4 games this year. And I'm not sure there's a lot of guys in the NBA on the minimum that are winning you 3 or 4 games a year. He was plus 35 last night in 29 minutes, 7 blocks, 2 steals, 2 assists, 17 rebounds. He was an unbelievable force, and we were so bad to start the first and third quarters. When he came into the game, he had to bail us out. And frankly, we're pretty good when he's on the floor. Again, he's on the minimum. I get there's a bunch of craziness to him, but our offense is 5.5 points better when he's on the floor, and our defense is only 4 points worse. We're a plus 1.6 when Hassan Whiteside's on the floor. I really don't know what else you're asking for. I get it. There's days where he looks like he doesn't have energy, and there's days when he doesn't show the juice. I got it. But like big picture, I think we probably got to just accept and enjoy the ride with him a little bit. I just saw a note. I really wish it was Josh Hart instead. That's great. I wish it was Paul George. Healthy. I mean, I'm kind of going to, I'm leaving the name out of this guy in the chat room because I don't want to pick on him. I wish, sure, Josh Hart would have been really nice. Obviously, Portland wasn't moving Josh Hart. We have to figure out what Josh Hart would have definitely fit. And I think he's a perfect complementary player. And if Portland lets him go to get a max slot in the offseason, I would love to sign him to play next to Donovan. I think he'd be fabulous. But I'm kind of joking. Like, if we're going to, obviously Josh Hart wasn't available or probably would have done it. So if you're going to go dream, I don't want Harrison. I wish it was Harrison Barnes or Jeremy Grant. I wish it was LeBron. To some extent, that's equally as unrealistic as saying, I wish it was Josh Hart or I wish it was Harrison Barnes or I wish it was just because names have been mentioned out there. If teams aren't willing to do it on some level of reality, then saying, I wish it was so-and-so if that player's not available is just as realistic as me saying, I wish it was Ja Morant. Right? You understand? Kind of follow my logic there. It sounds weird, but there is a level here where I wish it was someone else. Well, okay, well, they weren't available. Frankly, I wish that they had cut the luxury tax for the well-being of the ownership and the well-being of the franchise in the future. And the fact is, I talked to everyone in the league and they were like, that would just be basketball insanity. And the fact that we have an ownership group that wasn't willing to do it is pretty great. Other than last night, Donovan was so good last night. I think we've kind of forgotten about Donovan Mitchell and how outstanding he has been this whole season. Defensively, at times, he needs to buy in or dig in a little bit more, not buy in, dig in a little bit more. And the fact is that he is just become a better and better player, and his vision last night was incredible. And he wasn't shooting it well at first and then was diming it, and his rebounding as a guard is terrific. Jerry Sloan, top 15 coach of all time, always used to say that you have to have a rebounding guard to win. And he was doing that last night and then leading the break, and it makes us play faster and got us out and going. And Donovan was just outstanding last night. That's as good a game as I've seen Donovan play. They'll have nights where he goes crazy shooting and he's unstoppable, being guarded. But this other stuff that he's adding, the passing, the rebounding, the energy, the defense, pretty great. And those are the kind of things that are going to win. I think what's gotten forgotten in all of this little stretch of January is that Donovan and Rudy are way better than they've ever been before. Donovan and Rudy are better players than they were a year ago. And that makes an awfully big difference to who the Utah Jazz are as a team. And now Trent Forrest is playing with this confidence and this belief. Trent Forrest last night was so good, taking guys one-on-one, guarding Steph, 11 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists. He's 0 for 3 from 3. He really doesn't shoot the 3 well, but some of his other efficiency stuff is not bad, by the way. Like, he's so good shooting twos and getting the basket and knowing when to shoot and pick his spots. The 3, I'm a little worried about him in the playoffs when the scouting reports are out and they just sag off him and don't get him the ball. But he's not hurting us a great deal on the offensive end right now until somebody really starts to scout him and drops off him in a manner. But his individual possession usage is fine. He's actually above average points gain player right now because he is so efficient with the drives to the basket, the amount he gets to the rim, the amount he's attacking, and really fun to watch him develop into a player. He has done a just huge job, just a huge developmental job, and the confidence. I mean, you go back to this press conference he had probably about 8 weeks ago about, well, I don't shoot because I'm on the floor with Joe and Boyan and Donovan, Mike, and they're always telling me to shoot, but I don't shoot. And now all of a sudden he's attacking. There was a play where he went ISO and beat a guy, and Donovan turned over to Quinn like, let's run it again. I mean, they're all into it. And so I think that you're seeing that kind of energy come out of the young guys. I mean, Doka, Pascal, Trent Forrest have brought us an energy. Jared Butler have brought us an energy and juice we didn't have before. And that's pretty great. Trade alert. Ibaka to the Bucks. Is that what you're telling me just happened? We have a live trade deadline show today. Dante DiVincenzo, Marvin Bagley to the Pistons. The Kings are acquiring Dante DiVincenzo in a 4-team deal. Bucks are acquiring Serge Ibaka. That's interesting. Wow. Why are they moving Serge Ibaka? Dante DiVincenzo is pretty good, actually. That's a pretty good pickup for the Kings. Marvin Bagley's going to the Pistons. He's not. It's hard to analyze these live. What Kevin Pelton does when he turns them that fast, it's pretty amazing. Pistons wanted Marvin Bagley for a while here to see if they could turn him into something. It's a good flyer, frankly, for a team that's not good. I am hearing Jeremy Grant. Here's, by the way, just to let you know, here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing Jeremy Grant does not get moved today. The Pistons probably can get more in the offseason. I am hearing that the Brooklyn Ben Simmons deal goes down. So that is kind of what I'm hearing. From a standpoint of the Jazz today, to wrap this all up, at this point, you're now trading Jordan Clarkson, Bojan Bogdanovic, Rudy Gay. You're really trading something. You're giving something away. So you better be getting something back that fits that rotation piece. And then from a minor piece, Daniel House is still floating around there. I would suspect that we'll sign him to an actual contract for the rest of the year to fill in the rest of this roster. And so that would, if you're trading for someone, they better be better than Daniel House at this point. So if you're giving up JC, I don't think Alexander-Walker is a play to go trade JC in the next move. In that, I don't expect that to happen. The biggest thing to me at this point, frankly, is I just don't think we have a lot of bows in our quiver. I said this all week. Here's the biggest thing to me. Does Phoenix do anything to get better? Does Golden State do anything to get better? The Clippers already have gotten a good deal better in who they are. Do the Lakers salvage this in some way? Does Minnesota, Dallas, or Denver improve? What's the landscape in the West for the Utah Jazz as they proceed the rest of the way? When we've been good, we've been good. We haven't been great this year until maybe last night. We still have a team that's got as good a chance to win it as anyone. We added a little athleticism, probably not something that pushes our championship meter over yesterday. It doesn't seem as though that's available to us. Is there something out there that somebody else does that moves the championship meter? Like if I go to 538 right now or Basketball Reference and look at the standings on the season, I think what you'll see is that everyone has, when you look at a chance to win the title, right now, the Suns have a 25%. The Golden State Warriors have a 23%. The Jazz have a 12%. Cleveland's got a 9%. Crazy, I know. Miami's got 8%. Somehow they only have Milwaukee at 4%. So is there anything that's going to move that meter today? Is anything going to move Phoenix to 30%? Golden State to 30%? Memphis is only at 6%. Are they going to get to 9%? Dallas, Denver, Minnesota are not thought of championship caliber teams right now. Do they do something that gets them there? Those are the moves that I'm keeping an eye on, as much as as much as I would think you're looking at what takes place with the Jazz is really what everybody else does along the way. So it is Locked On Jazz. Hope you had a good one. Make sure you go to Locked On NBA and grab the trade deadline show. Kurt, thank you for supporting Locked On. It's been an amazing week. We're live as well. Goran Dragic to the Spurs for Thad Young. It's interesting. Thad Young's interesting. He's left-handed. I'm never quite sure how much he helps you win. All right, we'll just talk about all of them tomorrow. I'll break them all down for you. And the live trade deadline's coming up. And I'll tweet out some stuff if I can when I can. All right, talk to you later. Have a great one. See you.